If you love the Raiders and you had a hell of a time yesterday watching our Pete Carroll live stream, hit that subscribe button. We need 21. Can you do some for me? I'm trying to get to 212,000 subscribers. Help us continue to grow the number one Raiders community out there. We're going to do our best to keep you up to date on all things going around this head coaching search. Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Reds here, host of the Raiders Report. And coming up on today's show, we got some major NFL news that could impact the Las Vegas Raiders. We are first going to talk about a coach where there's been some smoke around him and the silver and black. And then at the end of this show, we are going to talk about a potential head coach candidate that the Raiders are interested in. Let's first start this thing off, though, with Kliff Kingsbury, because the news that broke earlier this morning, Adam Schefter here is able to confirm it. The Commanders' offensive coordinator, Kliff Kingsbury, is leaving the organization to pursue other opportunities. Kingsbury and head coach Dan Quinn met today and agreed to mutually part ways. Because this is the time of the offseason, we always are going to discuss things that could impact the Raiders because obviously we need a head coach. He's looking for a potential head coaching opening, and the Raiders at one point were interested in Kliff as an OC. Now, with the NFL, there are always going to be odds out there. With Vegas, always going to be odds out there. And I know right now that Kliff isn't one of the top candidates out there, but the fact that he is even in the top 10 is one of the reasons why we're going to discuss it today. The other reason why I'm going to do it is because I get asked a lot on social media, at MitchellRens365, would you want Kliff Kingsbury to be the next Raiders head coach? Well, guess what I'm going to do here? I'm going to ask all of y'all, and then I'm going to give you my opinion. Would you want the silver and black to hire Kliff as the head coach? Type H for hire, type P for pass. My answer is going to be coming up here after this YouTube ad break. Pass, pass, pass. I have absolutely positively no interest for Kliff Kingsbury to be a head coach. Will I have some interest in him being an offensive coordinator? Yes. Is he probably in my top 5 offensive coordinators that I would interest? No, not really. But at the end of the day, you at least got to pick up the phone, and I think you got to see if Kliff would be interested in the OC job. But here's why I personally do not think that the Raiders are going to show any interest in Kliff. He is a better OC. I feel like when I talk about Kingsbury, I'm talking about Josh McDaniels, because I do think they're very similar in the idea of they are good X's and O's guys. You can tell that they're smart offensive minds, but not everybody is built to be a head coach. Some people are simply built to be a coordinator, because when he was the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals from 2019 to 2022, he had a record of 28-37-1. That was also an organization that selected Kyler Murray number 1 overall. I don't know if I really want to give somebody the opportunity to go get another quarterback number 1 overall when you already showed me that it didn't work. He was also 0-1 in the playoffs. No playoff wins. And then one of the most surprising hires I remember at my time here at Chat Sports was when Kliff got promoted from Texas Tech to then go be the head coach of the Cardinals, a team where he took over Texas Tech. They won 8 games that first year. His final 3 years, he had a losing record, 35-40. Patrick Mahomes was one of the quarterbacks on that team, and they were 1-2 in bowl games. If you can't win in college, and you already didn't win in the NFL when you had the number 1 overall pick, what makes me think that you're going to be able to make it work this time around for the Las Vegas Raiders? Let's go to the next reason why I don't think he's going to be the head coach of the Silver and Black. There's more interest elsewhere. I have not heard, I have not seen that the Raiders are at all interested in Kliff Kingsbury. I do know that there was a report from Jeremy Fowler last week where he assumed that the Raiders could potentially show a little bit of interest, but I think that was him just guessing. And in terms of Schultz, he put out earlier today that Kliff is expected to interview with the Giants and the Titans, amongst others, for that head coaching option. I'm not saying it's impossible, because the Raiders, again, did show interest in Kliff before as an offensive coordinator. But to me, I believe this. For Kliff to leave Washington, for Kliff to leave Jaden Daniels, because I remember, last offseason, 2024 offseason, when One of the reasons why Kliff did not want to stick with the Raiders because he wanted to work with Jaden. So I know how important Jaden Daniels was to Kliff Kingsbury. But for him to leave Jaden, for him to leave Washington, I almost wonder if Kingsbury thinks that he already has a job in line. Maybe that's Tennessee. Maybe it's the New York Giants. But when Jordan Schultz puts out something like this, that my understanding is that key Commanders offensive players, including quarterback Jaden Daniels, are disappointed with the team's decision to part ways with Kliff Kingsbury because Daniels vouched for him to stay in his presser on Monday and was among those blindsided by the move. Offensive players on the team figured the only way Kingsbury would be gone is if he got a head coaching job. So to me, I read that and I go, I wonder if Kliff thinks that he's already got a job lined up. And because of the timing, smoke and fire, for Jordan to put out that report and then for him to say Giants and Titans, Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, there is some quarterback potential to be able to work with there. Let's go to the final reason, and I think it might be the biggest reason. People could say what they want about Mark Davis in terms of being an NFL owner, but Mark is one of the nicest people out there, and he is one of the most normal dudes that has $1 billion in his bank account, right? But I was told by a source that Mark Davis and other Raiders higher-ups don't trust him. And that doesn't really shock me at all. Kliff backed out of a verbal agreement. It's also on the Raiders and that organization for thinking that a verbal handshake agreement meant that Kliff Kingsbury was going to be the next offensive coordinator in 2024. If you don't know what I'm talking about, when the Raiders hired Antonio Pierce, when they went out and hired Tom Telesco back in 2024, they also hired Kliff Kingsbury for about 24 hours. I had somebody reach out to me and tell me that Kliff was literally sitting with a group of people at this one establishment in Vegas, and he said that I'm not going to take that Raiders job. And the reasons were he wanted a 3-year deal. The Raiders were only willing to offer him 2. I was the very first person to tweet it out. If you don't believe me, look it up on Twitter at MitchellRents365. The other thing, though, was he wanted to be able to work with Jaden. He wanted to be able to have a path at a quarterback that he truly believed in. So the fact that this separation is happening when it does, I think that means Kliff's going elsewhere. But I also know Mark is a big, trust guy. And if he doesn't trust you, I don't really know how you hire that person to be a head coach. Offensive coordinator is a possibility. Head coach, though, I just don't see it happening. Coming up next here on the program, a Raiders head coaching candidate. I'm going to be real. I already put out a short on this. I already discussed this. If you do follow me on social, I think that what I'm about to talk about here might make some people sick. Not saying that this person's not good at their job. They're damn good at their job. But again, it's another example of not everybody is built to be a head coach. Some guys are simply just coordinators, but we're going to talk about somebody that the Raiders have requested to interview to be their next head coach. Before I get into that, though, shout out to PrizePicks. I can't wait for Indiana and Oregon. I'm going to be live here on the Raiders Report, watching Fernando Mendoza, watching Dante Moore. But with high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend, elite hoops action, a little bit of college football, let PrizePicks make sure that you're having a good time. And on PrizePicks, you can take control. You can find your community on PrizePicks with the new social feeds feature. You can share picks with your friends, copy lineups from winners with a single click, copy lineups you like, use them as inspiration for your own picks. You can even follow PrizePicks partners like me and tailor-fade my picks with just one click. So if you go on PrizePicks and you look up Mitchell Rents 365, I know it's a shocker that that's my name, but that's what it is. You'll see that this is my lineup. It's a $5 to pay $37.50. It is a 4-pick power play. I decided to go with the Moore on Dante Moore passing touchdowns. It's a goblin pick at 0.5, but I want to see points, and I want to see 2 young quarterbacks go out there and show why each of those guys think that they deserve to be the number 1 pick. For Fernando Mendoza, I'm going to go the less on the interception route. I'm going to go more on the passing yards, 208.5, and I am going to go the less on 24.5, but that's just because I can't stand the way that college football does their rushing yards. So you could pick more or less on at least 2 to 6 player stats, safe and secure, billions paid out. It's available in all 50 states. So what the heck are you waiting for? Download the PrizePicks app today. Make sure that you use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. So now let's go to a Raiders head coach candidate here. I want to be clear. I already know 3 others, and now on top of that is Vance Joseph. Technically, though, if we want to be officially official, this is officially official. The number one, very first Raiders head coach candidate for the year of 2026 after moving on from Pete Carroll. This one's coming in from Schefter. Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph is expected to interview this week for the Raiders, Cardinals, Giants, and Titans head coaching vacancies per sources. Obviously, that begs the question, is Joseph going to be the next head coach for the Raiders? Because if Schefter's putting it out there, he also interviewed with the Silver and Black last season. Obviously, the Raiders decided to go with Pete Carroll ahead, but he is the 4th known head coach candidate for the Raiders. And the other reason why the Raiders have not requested to interview Minter or Saleh, they're still in the playoff hunt. They have not requested Brian Flores. They could technically do that. There's been very well documented that the Raiders are interested in Flores. I have also said before the Pro Football Talk report came out that the Raiders were interested in Flores. Before all the other reports came out, we talked about Minter and Saleh a bunch. But as it stands right now, in terms of the people that I talked to, Minter, Saleh, Flores, and Vance Joseph are the Raiders head coach candidates. What's interesting about that is there's a lot of people that go, well, we got the number 1 overall pick. It's important for us to get an offensive-minded head coach because we got Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, Fernando Mendoza. That's probably going to be your next 3 first-round picks or your last 3 first-round picks, and they're all on the offensive side of the football. So the fact that all of those guys are defensive coaches is very intriguing to me. If we're talking about resume, because that's what Vance is going to do. He's going to try to sell the job to Mark Davis, Tom Brady, and John Spytek. The problem is, though, when he was the head coach of the Broncos for 2 seasons, they were 11-21. He was the Dolphins defensive coordinator in 2026, Cardinals DC from 2019 to 2022. Maybe a little overlap there with Kliff. Broncos DC from 2023 to the current time. He is a respected, and I do mean this, he is a respected defensive mind. 53 years old. The reason why that I just throw in age anymore is because when you deal with a 74-year-old head coach, I finally feel like mentioning age is a very, very important qualifier for whoever the hell we're going to hire next. So what do you think? I asked you about Kliff earlier. If you thought I wasn't going to ask you about Vance, then you don't watch this show too often. Give me a yes. Give me a no. If your voice sounds like this, I know that you hung out with me last night. What Vance Joseph to be the Raiders' next head coach? Please let me know. You're going to get with another YouTube ad break. My answer coming up here in just a moment. This is another no for me, dog. I got no interest in Vance Joseph to be the next Raiders head coach. Quite frankly, I actually think that he's got a good thing going, as much as I hate to admit that, in the AFC West. And if I was close to Vance, I would tell him to stay the defensive coordinator of the Denver Broncos, a team that's got one of the best defenses in the NFL, because he will continuously get opportunities until an opportunity shows up on his front doorstep that might be too good to be true. But also, job security is really hard to find in the NFL. I think he's got a lot of job security in Denver with Sean Payton as a DC. But here's why I don't think that the Raiders are going to end up hiring him. 11-21 head coach record. I'm sick and tired of hiring people that have already failed. To me, the Raiders' job is the best job out there. We got the number 1 pick. We got salary cap space. We got draft picks. We have a good front office. There is a lot to work with. Solid pillar players as well. I just don't know why we would hire Vance Joseph. To me, the only reason why you would hire Vance is because you want to bring him in for 1 year. You're going to tank on purpose, and then you're going to go out and get another guy in 2027. If the Raiders are just going to do that, probably should have just kept Pete. I don't want Pete. Nobody wants here to keep Pete. But going out and getting Vance Joseph after the season we just dealt with, that tells me that you asked 10 other people and all 10 of those other people said no. Let's go to the next reason here. When Vance was the head coach of Denver, the quarterback play was not any good. It is unbelievably important for our next head coach to either A, know how to coach his quarterbacks, or B, find somebody that can coach QBs. Now, the talent level here ain't great. Let's just be real. In 2017, they had Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler, and Paxton Lynch. Now, Lynch was a first-round pick out of Memphis, I believe in 2016, but that did not go well. Case Keenum then comes in the next year in 2018. This looks like the Raiders quarterbacks that I've had to watch over the past 3 years. If you're going to bring in a defensive-minded head coach that's got a losing record, the only way that you're going to be able to sell me on him is if you were to be like, well, he's always done a good job with quarterbacks. Losing record, bad quarterbacks, I don't understand why we would do it. What I'm about to say here is the reason why I think the Raiders are requesting Vance Joseph, and it's because of the Rooney Rule. If you don't know what the Rooney Rule is, I'm going to explain it to you. I've explained it a few times on this show. I want to be very clear here. I like the Rooney Rule, and I don't like the Rooney Rule at the exact same time because I think what ends up happening is guys' time is wasted. But I also understand why the Raiders are doing it, and I'll explain that here in just a moment. So the Rooney Rule is an NFL policy requiring teams to interview minority candidates for head coaching and senior football operations jobs. It was established in 2003 to boost diversity in leadership by ensuring underrepresented groups get a fair look, though its effectiveness is debated, leading to expansions to include women and coordinators and variations in other industries. So the reason why I'm going to sit up here and say I think this is a Rooney Rule interview is because I don't really think that they're going to consider Vance Joseph for the actual head coaching job. Other reason why I think that this could potentially be the case is because sometimes the Rooney Rule interviews happen early. Because what you want to do if you're the Raiders is this. Whoever your top candidate is, whoever your number one guy is, when he enters that room, you don't let him leave. Like, if your top guy is Jesse Minter, you don't let him out the door. If your top guy is Robert Saleh, you don't let him out the door. If your top guy is Clint Kubiak, you don't let him out the door. To make sure that you can hire the number one guy that you want to hire, sometimes you got to be able to bring in other coaches because of the Rooney Rule to then be able to hire that guy right away. So you bring in a Vance Joseph. It's okay. The other reason why, though, I understand the interview, because he is the defensive coordinator for an AFC West rival. And I'm going to tell Vance, why do you want the job? If I'm Vance Joseph and I'm actually trying to sell myself, I'm trying to sell the Denver Broncos everything that I've been able to do on defense. If I can get a little bit of an inside look on an AFC West rival, I understand that thought process. I also understand the thought process of, I don't think we're going to hire Vance, but let's bring him in. Let's interview him. Let's get one of the Rooney Rule interviews out of the way. That way, the guy that we do want to hire, if you're the Raiders and he's your number one guy and you don't want a Ben Johnson situation, you don't want a Mike Vrabel situation where your top two dudes decide not to be here, whoever your number one guy is, when he's in that room, you don't let him leave. And the way that you can do that is by bringing in a guy like Vance, bringing in another minority candidate for the Rooney Rule, doing that, and then getting ready to go hire your guy. So in conclusion here, the major NFL news that happened today, Kliff Kingsbury ended up leaving to the Washington Commanders. Vance Joseph was requested to interview with the Las Vegas Raiders. I do not have Kingsbury, and I do not have Vance in my top 10 Raiders head coach candidates list, but I understand why people are asking. I understand why there's a lot of rumors out there. To me, though, this is just the Silver and Black doing their due diligence to make sure that whoever they really, truly want to get, they can hire him and not let him leave the door. If you do not know, I am also going to be live this Friday. Can't wait, man. Peach Bowl, we got Dante Moore in Oregon up against Indiana and Fernando Mendoza. I want Indiana to win. I want Fernando to win. And if you don't know why, I'm going to be dropping a video later on this week. And that video is going to be why every member of Raider Nation, if your Raiders are your number one team, and I mean your number one team, every single person that bleeds silver and black should want Fernando Mendoza and the Indiana Hoosiers to win the national championship. If you want to find out why, make sure you're subscribed, make sure those notifications are turned on, and make sure you join us. We had over 100,000 people join us last week for the Indiana game. I think we might get 200,000 people. Make sure you're pulled up to the number one Raiders community in the world.